Okay, we're on with Tracy McLaughlin, one of the top agents in the country. Good morning, Tracy. How are you?
I'm well, Rod. Great to hear from you.
You too. No, I appreciate you jumping on. And I think the whole real estate community is going to love some of the stuff that comes out of this. The one thing I'll say is when we met, or we first started kind of working together on the project in San Francisco, as the first person probably ever, not to mention real estate agent, that I thought that everything you said about what we should be doing with that property to kind of maximize value, maximize marketing, and put it under the best light and get the top number. I think I agreed with 100% of everything you said. So anyway, it was refreshing because I'm pretty adamant in a lot of areas, and to have you basically almost say the same things I would say was pretty fun.
Oh, thank you, Rod. That's a great compliment coming from you. I totally appreciate it.
No, I think you're amazing as far as just being able to see the whole picture, as far as design to staging to everything, and not to steal the thunder. So the first thing, before we get too far into what you suggest or whatever, kind of your top strategies and secrets and whatnot, I know you're in the process of writing a book. So I thought I'd just maybe ask you, a little bit about the book project. Why write a book? I assume you're, sharing a lot of your kind of secrets about how to maximize real estate, and what was the driving force behind it?
Yeah, great question. So in a nutshell, after having done this for 19 years now, I believe, for years I've watched people make mistakes. I haven't been involved in those mistakes, but I've watched people I know in our community make grave errors on either how they or what they bought or how they sold a house. And there was one particular circumstance. I don't know if you actually want to hear the story, but
Absolutely.
there was a pivotal moment in time where I saw a woman literally leave about $650,000 on the table between the offer that I originally made on her home and when she went to sell it, 7 or 8 months later. And I thought, there's enough in this now for me to write a book about what not to do to optimize what's likely your biggest investment. If you want to hear the details of the story, I'm happy to share them. But there's a chapter title, I believe, called "I Hope That Friendship Was Worth $500,000 Plus."
Wow.
So what happens? So the nuts and bolts of the book. It starts out with allowing readers to understand why we, as an industry, are mistrusted, not credible to the consumer. And that really largely, Rod, has to do with lack of required education and testing in some ways to make you really operate at a level where you should be to manage what is somebody's biggest asset. So if you're a money manager, you need a required 4-year education, and you take a Series 7, and then you sign all sorts of agreements with your brokerage. And it's a very regulated industry. This is the only industry that really, really lacks regulation. And all you need in most states is to be 18 years old. You need 60 hours of Anthony's, real estate school, and bang, you're sitting across the table from somebody and giving them guidance on how to sell what is likely their biggest asset. And so, first of all, that's just, in my opinion, inherently wrong. So the book starts out with explaining what happens is there's so many people that are unqualified to do this that I believe there's some national statistic of, and I can't remember the exact number, but it's a large amount of the American population does not believe or trust in their real estate advisor. So what happens is people, because of the inherent mistrust, don't listen to people like me or other top agents who actually know what they're talking about and follow our guidance. So the beginning of the book basically says, I love what I do for a living, but every day I wake up and I find myself arguing with my own clients about how to best serve them. So that's kind of the preface of this book. And then it moves on from there into multiple chapters on anything and everything you can think of in terms of how to manage the sale or purchase of a home and how to do that the right way so you know that you are not leaving money on the table. So anyway, that's a little bit about that, and I can go into whatever else you'd like to know about it.
No, that's great. I'm really looking forward to the book. And I think this is, not only is this the kind of content related to real estate that I think is necessary, because there's most of the other books out there don't really get into the nuts and bolts about how to maximize a sale and how to, go through kind of the process of selling a home in a professional manner. And I think it's pretty timely too. You got a lot of the no fee or no commission, real estate brokerages, and everyone's there's some of the bigger brokerages providing services at either reduced fee or no no fee or whatever. And I think that it's really kind of degrading what a good agent does. And I couldn't agree more that there's so much involved in a transaction versus put it on MLS and sell it. It's starting to lose its value. And I think people are going to get stung, and they, ultimately, like you're saying, leave a ton of money on the table.
Yes, algorithms cannot predict things like a market shift within a week and when that's going to occur. Markets can change overnight. And how do you manage people's expectations with a shifting market? And the algorithms cannot predict that in the middle of an escrow, a roof started leaking and the whole transaction had to stop and somebody had to be, there are so many things that happen in the course of a real estate deal. There are hundreds of things can go wrong, and computers cannot manage the emotion that gets attached between buyer and seller in the management of that sale. There's just no way. And, I've interviewed people all over the country for this book. I've talked to people that are very tech and real estate driven, and their supposition is like, oh yeah, but Tracy, it will be very much the norm, in the upcoming years, that if you've got a subdivision of cookie cutter homes sitting in the flats of, call it Phoenix, Arizona or something, that there really won't need to be a buy-side agent because they'll be available and you'll pick A, B, or C, and that'll be the end of it. Well, yeah, that's the end of it until something you cannot foresee occurs, like a market shift. I remember watching in 2008, people that were in escrow on very expensive homes, $6-7 million homes in Ross, Kentfield, wherever, and they went into contract at the end of August, and the house closed after, it was closing. So in other words, the agreed upon price was 17 to 25% more than the house was worth 3 weeks later, right? Because in the implosion of 2008 with Lehman. So what happened during that time? Well, what's the computer going to do? Turn around and say, wait a minute, we just had we're going to adjust this. All that stuff needs human voices, brain power, strong negotiating skills, and someone has to manage that process. So yes, do I believe that technology is going to bring us faster, greater virtual tours in homes, and will it allow us to probably manage, be on a platform like Compass's platform is to put, the title company, the need for all these things will be available in kind of one-stop shopping, because right now it is an inefficient system, right? The title companies over there, the lenders over there, the real estate agents over there, the home contractors over there. And then people are and sources are in all sorts of different places. And so there could be some tidying up of that and making that far more manageable from one platform, more efficient. But I do not think you can dehumanize real estate transactions, and my book speaks to that as well. So.
No, that's great. I couldn't agree more, because it would come down to it. It's people. And like you said, it's their, largest financial transaction of their life, most people. And there's emotions and there's just so much involved.
So I will tell you that if you like, I'll share this story with you about why I wrote the book, because I think it's so telling about how people make mistakes, and we can talk about that later. But I'd like to tell you the story quickly, because I think it's so... Okay, so basically there's a fairly well-to-do couple in Ross, California, going through a divorce. He was very generous. The wife had not worked since her children were born, so it wasn't like she was going to run out and get a job the next day. So she was relying on the proceeds from their biggest asset, which was this, $5.2 million home in Kentfield. And so it was in Kentfield. It was in the Ross School District, but it was a Kentfield address. And so he very generously gave her that asset and said, this is yours in the divorce. I'll take whatever commercial buildings and whatever he had. And so she stayed there for a couple of years and then decided to sell the house. A friend of hers, who's a bit of a socialite, had no career background at all, had just been in San Francisco really as a socialite, decided to get a license and had been kind of an earpiece to her through her divorce, had been a good friend listening to the, divorce stories and things. So when she made the decision to select a real estate agent, she felt obligated to pick her friend who's a socialite, who had zero experience, even transacting $1 or $2 million homes, let alone a $5.2 million house. So she goes and hires the stager she likes and knows. And they put too high of a price on the house. I think they priced it, I want to say 5.5 or something like that. 5.4, 5.5. It was probably worth between 5.1 and 5.2. And the house goes on the market, and it's a beautiful house, but some of these rooms were not shown to be lived in the way you would optimize the investment. In other words, there was an overly grand dining room, but really no family room. Well, this is a family-driven market. So the dining room should have been staged as a family room, and the little area they tried to cram into a family room should have been shown as a dining area. So simple things like that. The house was very tailored to what they wanted, but it didn't really meet the market needs in terms of the way it laid out and showed. And certainly the stager did a disservice to that listing by not showing people how to live in it to optimize that. So they go on the market if they're too high of a price, and it sits there, and it should have sold immediately. But they've done the right price, right agent, right staging. And I come along with buyers of mine, and I run the numbers, and we make some kind of fair market offer at that point of it on like 3 weeks of $5 million or 5.1. I can't really remember the numbers. And they don't even respond to the offer. There's not even a counter offer. And I said to the agent, well, at least have them counter. I mean, nope. She's offended. We won't respond to that offer. I said, okay, well, goodbye. And we went and bought a beautiful home in San Rafael. So that was maybe in September of that year. The house sits. I think it had one price adjustment. Then in the holidays, it gets withdrawn. Then a new stager comes along. So let's call that 3 or 4 months of mortgage payments, because this woman has moved out. Now she's got rental payments on top of her mortgage payments. And now she's lost some money on that stager and brings in actually the guy I normally use. And he implements the ideas I would have done, right? But now it's, the beginning of January. Okay. And so that house goes back on the market. Now it's kind of yesterday's news. So it's sitting. So guess what? I think in March of that year, I come along with a new set of clients, and we buy this house for $4,650,000.
Wow.
So that situation and knowing that family for years and watching her, I woke up one morning, I said, she will never know what she left on the table. She really thinks her house was only worth $4,650,000 because somebody mismanaged that almost into the ground, in my opinion. That house was worth easily what we had offered. It should have sold for that. And so that, the culmination of all that kind of came up with this chapter of, I hope that friendship was worth $500,000, because that's what it cost her to be her friend. And I've heard those same stories over and over. Somebody down the cul-de-sac from that house called me. Their listing wasn't selling. It was a $5 million house. It had been mismanaged. And he said, Tracy, we've known her for years. She used to pick us up at the airport for years. So when it came time to sell our house, we just felt like we had to use her. Or Aunt Gertrude got her license last month. We need to call it Aunt Gertrude. I mean, who does this, right? Except for in residential real estate. If you had $5 million of liquid assets in a portfolio, you would not call Aunt Gertrude and go, do you want to manage that and put it in the market for me? You would never do that, right? So anyway, that only happens in this business because if we go back to chapter 1, lack of regulation, lack of needed education, there's no scrutinization of what those agents have said to those sellers about what to do. Nobody's monitoring the discourse between San Francisco socialites and poor women who've gone through divorces in terms of what advice she's giving her. So she marched off with $500,000 less in her lifetime. And that story, it crushed me to watch it, Rod. And I just decided I needed to write a book about it after watching that happen over and over and over again.
No, I'm so glad you did, because this is the type of stuff, there's tons of these types of stories, and it's putting it out and basically documenting it and showing someone that this is, I was just thinking as you're talking, it is the biggest, not a lot of people would argue it's one of the bigger financial decisions you ever make, but which means it's more of a business decision than it is any kind of personal decision, but people make decisions based on relationships and personalities and, how they're viewed in their circles, social circles versus being a business decision. So do you mind sharing?
And the problem is that people don't know enough to know enough.
Right.
They just don't know enough to know. And that's the problem. And the other issue with this industry is a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, right? People are on Zillow, they're on this, they're on that. So they all think they're almost as knowledgeable as their sales professionals. And so they leverage that. And then they marry that with the emotional tie to the home. I raised my children here. We celebrated somebody's bat mitzvah here. We woke up on Christmas every morning for 12 years here. And I watched my children go from, 3 feet 2 to 6 feet in this house with the markers that go up the kitchen wall. There is such a lack of clarity in terms of what's real and what's not real when you're looking through the lens of emotional memories, families. It makes it very difficult for people to be impartial about the value of their own asset. And that is the biggest killer in terms of making money on your home, is overpricing it, overvaluing it.
Right.
It's a dangerous thing. Somebody clicks on Zillow, they believe that, then they're arguing with their agent in terms of what it's really worth.
Yeah, don't get me started on Zillow. So do you mind sharing a couple more secrets or kind of your top strategies in the book?
No, not at all. So I've made it a policy in this office, if we're talking about the list side. First of all, the most important thing I can do is appropriately evaluate the home. How do I do that? I start with pre-listing inspections, because if there's stuff going on inside the walls that I don't know about, we will be hugely compromised in our future sale. The worst thing that can happen to a seller is that their home purchase is canceled, a contract's canceled, or it's severely renegotiated and they're playing defense instead of offense. And so basically, what we do is I make it a policy in this office. I will not take a listing unless the seller is willing to do pre-listing inspections and full disclosures, and everything must be fully permitted, so that I'm going into that game offensively versus defensively. I hand that packet to buyers, they sign off on it, and they make offers. Usually, most of our deals don't have contingencies for inspections because we use the best inspectors here. And nobody's going to go rehire the best inspectors. So there's so much leverage with that. So the tip, I would say the most important things are pre-listing inspections, making sure all permits, if the house was recently done, or signed off on. It's a very clean, organized way to list a home. And then the appropriate evaluation predicated on your knowledge of all that and predicated on numbers. I mean, I'm always telling people I think is a quote in the book, there are no Picassos in real estate. Oprah went into Santa Barbara and broke the ceiling of valuation, right? Like nothing had ever traded for $38 million down there. Oprah did it, and she validated it was okay to spend that kind of money in Montecito. We can break the ceilings of valuations, but every homeowner thinks their home is a Picasso. It's not. It's a numbers-driven business. Somebody may elect to break that ceiling, but they're still pulling numbers from surrounding properties and understanding how to value land and then how to value the structure, and marrying those two things and understanding what finishes, et cetera, command what kind of number. And that's how we price homes. We don't price them based on, I think my home's a piece of work of art, and in an auction it would go crazy, and it should be crazy, numbers in the marketplace. That's not what happens. So a lot of the book is about making people understand that pricing the house right at or slightly below its real market value, with the hope, and I talk to people all over the country about this, multiple offers will be generated. There is no number that's too low for a house. And I did a lot of playing around with this. Like, can you underprice a house? The fact of the matter is no. The market will always take it to what it's worth, and usually beyond what it's worth, by more than one person wanting it. So strategic pricing is an enormous part of this, Rod. And we use all sorts of case studies. William Sonoma using a bread maker. You'd have to read the book, but we have case studies on every single subject that I write about. And creating competition is the most important thing you can do when you sell a home. Because what happens when you've got two buyers? All you need are two. You don't need 10, you need two. What you're doing is that artificial inflationary pricing comes from somebody trying to take something away from another person. It's no longer about the value of the home. When somebody's guessing at what somebody else will pay, that's where their emotions go out in front of their sort of linear, logical thinking. And they say, I need to take it from buyer Y. Let's offer this. I've got to take it away from them. And that's where sellers get that extra cream on their coffee, or whatever you want to call it. It's because they've created competition in the asset. So my pricing strategy is always right at or slightly below what something's worth, or even $100,000 or $200,000 below. It just depends on the house, so that I know I will drive it up to the highest possible price. And getting sellers to understand this and agree to it is one of the biggest impediments to what I do for a living. So the book talks a lot about that as well.
And then does it matter the price point? Because I would agree with you 100% on the high, especially when you get into higher priced homes and markets and buyers, that competitive nature, that usually those guys have a lot more room. Whereas if you get into kind of the lower end, lower price point, they're like they're only qualified for a certain number and cannot go a dollar above. And so I've wondered whether on the lower end, if it's harder to go super low, either two things I think that affect it. One is how, if prices go over in a hot market, they tend to go over 100,000 on average, 100,000 in a hot market of Sunnyvale over the last couple of years or whatever. But when things soften, or actually, if it's in that hot market, you're not going to go 2 or 3 or 400 over. At least that's not what the normal market does. The flip side is if you're in a market where you've got savvy real estate agents and they know what the real values are, I think maybe you could, in that particular case, maybe you could go 300 or 400 over, even though the average ask over list is only 100. But if you're in a lower, call it lower price point market where maybe the agents aren't as savvy, and you got a lot of the new agents, or they've closed one transaction in their life or whatever, they don't get the market, and they advise their clients not to go, high enough or, to what the real value of the property is to get it. And you don't get that the higher end. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. So I think, maybe the only, well, let me start with answering this. What happens when you're trying to generate multiple offers is, let's say you have a house priced at $1 million, and let's say 4 buyers out of your 5 can afford just $1 million. A lot of times agents will say, geez, I think this is going over, but let's just throw our hat in the ring. Let's just put a number, because you never know, right, what's going to happen. So they do that, and the 4 buyers at $1 million, that's great. What happens is that 5th buyer comes along who can afford $1.05 million. And that agent checks in with the listing agent, oh, there's 4 offers. And they say, okay, well, we're going to be the 5th. We can go. Those 4 people pushed that 5th guy to spend that extra $50,000. If the house had been priced at $1.05 million and it was only worth $1 million, then what would have happened was nobody would have showed up at the party, and the house would have dropped down to $1 million in a price reduction. So it's just what you're doing is you're leveraging the people that can only afford that number to push the one rogue buyer guy or the 2 rogue buyers or whoever many are out there to go up and above what it's worth, because they're no longer thinking about this house is really only worth $1 million. They're thinking, I get away from those other 4 people. What's the most I'm willing to spend, even though I probably shouldn't do this? It's probably a little bit too much. This is all the dialogue you hear, right?
Right.
So if that makes sense, it works. I did it on a $9 million house. I priced it exactly where I knew I would generate multiple offers. That's very unheard of here. I sold another $10.5 million house the first week for exactly $10.5 million, because that's what it was worth. So what happens when you crawl into really super high numbers, 10 million, 9 million, 12 million, sellers go, oh, well, no one's ever actually going to really offer us that price, so we might as well put it high because we want 13, so let's put it at 14.5 or 15 because those people are going to negotiate anyway, right? That's the dialogue you hear all the time. The fact of the matter is you can trade out a $10 or $12 million house the first week it's on the market, if there's a market for that. I mean, I'm not talking about doing this in Peoria, Illinois, where there's never been a $12 million house. But if there's a market for a $10, $12, $14 million home, and you have quantitative evidence that's defensive of that price, you will sell that house immediately for its value. It is harder to get people on the higher end to believe this, but I have it. I've done it. I've proven it. And so you don't overprice on any level. You don't say, let's pad rooms for negotiations, because what happens is when that price is too high, there are no negotiations because there are no buyers. They sit back and they're very reluctant to go out into the playing field until they feel the price is in alignment with their expectations. They don't, and they do that for a myriad of reasons. It's very hard for sellers to understand. They don't want to offend a seller in case there's future negotiations. So they hang back and they wait for a physical price change on MLS. And it's counterintuitive because as a buyer, you get a way better price. Once the asset's been sitting there for a while and it's not selling, you're way better off as a buyer going in and going, I'm going to make a reasonable market, fair market value of this home. But it's not what the guy wants right now. And people won't do that. There's all sorts of psychological studies that show the resistance to offering something that's not in alignment with where it's publicly priced. So anyway, there's so much psychology to all this, but it's quite interesting. So that's why the price of the home needs to come out at, just at or even slightly below if you're willing to trust your advisor so that you can hopefully get more than one person wanting it. That is the bread and butter. That's where all the extra money in this business comes from.
It's such great advice, and I'm sitting here listening, going, I know this stuff, but even as an investor, developer, I like to think I'm not emotional, but you get emotional because every dollar counts, and it's even more for the for the person who's lived in the house because they've got all this other all these other ties and reasons why they want to believe it's going to be higher than it really is. That's advice for I think all of us here, and we'll definitely get the book and read the book and all the other strategies. The last question I wanted to ask you is kind of on the flip side of that. I know pricing strategy, and I'm sure you have a ton of other stuff of kind of the top tips and secrets. What's the top thing? The top mistake? What's the thing that people are either agents and advising their clients or sellers? What's kind of that top mistake they make or thing they miss when selling?
The top that sellers make?
Yeah, the top mistake. I mean, I get it. Pricing strategy is sounds like a big mistake, but what's kind of the other one that you would say that really affects value the most?
Yes, not preparing your home for sale and creating finishes and a look that are in alignment with what consumers want in that demographic. Huge part of this book is about staging, styling, and pre-listing, updating, so that you are, and again, if your house is so far gone that it's lot value, if you really have a teardown structure, then this is not applicable. But most of this book is about how to optimize the asset by keeping it current. And, it is critical for people to open design magazines, to check out House, to go on, whatever website and look at what consumers want. Because if your walls are yellow, the sales price goes down by $50,000 or $70,000 here. If the floors are yellow, and it is crazy. For every dollar we put into my listings, there's a $3 to $5 return on the work that I'm doing. I just made somebody about $1.4 million in Ross on $179,000 small, quick fix up before we went to market. People have got, what happens is, you do your house when you move in, right? And then all of a sudden 15 years have flown by. And, you still love your chandelier that's wrought iron with candelabras in it. And you still love your saturated, yellow walls and your whatever was in vogue then, your Ralph Lauren, printed sofas. And what's happened is the market, design demands pendulum swings about every 8 to 10 years. I mean, honestly, 10-year-old finishes are already dated on a house. So a lot of people's logical response is, well, Tracy, come on, nobody's going to fix their house up every 8 to 10 years. But the fact of the matter is, you need to keep it current. If yellow floors are no longer in, small, thin, whatever, oak flooring, and it's gone to a gray, darker stain, no, you don't have to replace your floors, but get them stained and keep them current before you go on the market. If wall color's gone to white because it contrasts better with art that you have, get the wall color white. Keep it moving along, even if it's not in alignment with what you love. Or do it. You're either going to pay for it. I always tell people you're either going to pay for it at the end when you sell your home, or you're going to pay for it as you're living there and hopefully enjoy it more. Either way, it comes out of your pocket. And one big thing, Rod, I think to point out is, a lot of people who bought, paid a lot of money for homes, 2004, 5, 6 in those years, and then called me 10 years later, 12 years later. And let's just say those homes already were a little tired or they weren't perfect. When I would run numbers on a lot of these houses, I'd say, gee, I hate to tell you this, but your house is worth exactly what you paid for it. And how could that be, Tracy? How could that be? I mean, yeah, we plummeted in 2008, but then we skyrocketed again starting in 2013 with an up market for 5 or 6 years. And what I tell those people is, every year that your home sits with tired finishes and it gets worse, every year it's more dated, more tired, more lived in, the depreciation of the use of that home offsets the straight market appreciation in a really good real estate market. So it flatlines. The two push against each other and you end up flatlining right where you started out when you bought the house. So there's always this misnomer oh yeah, the whole market shot up and everybody's house went up by 20, 30, 40%. That's just not true. It went up for homes where people were mindful of pre-listing improvements, or they bought in the right locations, or they did the right thing to monetize the asset. It's not true for people who don't ever want to put money into their homes, keeping them up with what the market wants, including, the less fun things like roofs and, foundation work. And, you've got to keep your home up. You've got to put money into it every year if you wanted to trade out at the height of the market for whatever time frame you're selling in. So long-winded answer to your question, but that's important.
No, that's great. That's perfect. And I agree with that. And I think that, between obviously the design, making everything flow, I think this is one thing that I've dealt with in the past anyway, is, working with contractors and actually competing with contractors who are either flipping houses or, building new houses, doing spec builds or whatever, is, they do the same thing every time and they get kind of in their groove. And I think that's where we tend to shine is, we do professional design, and actually with your help as well, just, getting really specific in what that market demographic's looking for. But I think the design and then obviously the staging and, is just hugely important. And I think so many people miss it because it's either plain or there's, various things like tops and tile and colors and stuff don't tie in all together. And it's a subconscious thing when people walk through a property that, they're not going to say exactly what they don't like. In fact, a lot of people even don't know what they don't like. But the fact is they don't like that house versus another one because of all these design elements.
That's right. And here's another interesting tip that I always tell people. Buyers will never say the word overpriced. They don't use that word in feedback to listing agents. They tell you what's wrong with the house. So you hear it's too this, it's too that, it doesn't have this, there's road noise there. Well, guess what? As soon as you drop the price, that road noise doesn't exist. As soon as you drop the price, they don't care that the kitchen's compartmentalized from the family room. Then once you drop the price and it's in alignment with what they want, all you hear about is what's right with the house versus what was wrong with the house. It's a straight pricing issue, but they don't use the word overpriced. They just tell you what's wrong with it.
Oh, that's great. So I want to respect your time, Tracy. Thanks a lot. All great feedback.
Hey, I enjoyed it.
My last little question for you. You always look amazing when I see you. You're always super upbeat, tons of energy. People that have worked with you know all this. What's your secret? If you could share with us either your secret related to that or how you start your day, what makes you, on and so energetic every time I see you?
Oh, that's such a great question. Well, I think honestly, some of it's my gene pool. My dad's the exact same way. I mean, he's 84 and he's riding a bike every day, like for 10 miles. So it could be my dad, but also I get up really early in the morning. I wake up at like 5 o'clock every morning and I do about 2 hours of yoga a day. And I do that before I go in, do yoga, come in here for 2 hours, and I go back to yoga usually at 9 o'clock. And then I come back here. And so that, I think, I tell my children the same thing, like there are some really valuable aspects of like being in the military. And one of them is how it teaches people that a really solidified routine where you take care of yourself first before you go out into the world, I think is really important. So the exercise and the sleep, I think all that's like really critical, especially as we get older, right? So, but yeah, having a routine, and I get a lot done early in the morning before people are outside my door, the phones are ringing. That's my favorite time of day is that super early dawn, because I think of a lot of ideas or a lot of branding or content for my listings. And I don't know, I really appreciate that time, working out and then getting creative early in the morning before the phones start ringing.
No, that absolutely. In fact, I'm writing this down where I have to increase my yoga practice, because it's funny how I don't do it enough, but you feel amazing after doing that. That's a great practice.
Yeah, and if you're ever up here, Rod, you've got to come to Susan Hauser's Rock and Roll Vinyasa with us. It's all hip hop, and oh my God, it's the best music. So half the time you're Shazamming it and buying it on the floor. And she's created an incredible community. They're actually doing a little sizzle reel right now for a reality TV show called not Namaste, but Dramaste in Marin County.
Oh, that's classic. I love it.
Isn't that funny? Oh my God.
So cool.
If you're up here.
I'm in. I'm going to have to check that out.
All right. You would love it, Rod.
Well, great.
Rod,
thanks, Tracy. Appreciate the time. We're looking forward to the book. It'll all be in the show notes. And we will talk to you very soon.
Yeah, I really appreciate you reaching out. Okay, take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.